This weekend, the Venezuelan opposition accused the Nicolas Maduro government of, quote, besieging political critics who have taken shelter in the Argentinian embassy in the capital, Caracas. The U.S. called the presence of Venezuelan police outside the embassy a serious violation of international law. Nick Schifrin speaks to the head of the opposition, but first looks at this summer's disputed election and what has happened since.
Through the window of Argentina's embassy in Caracas, an urgent alert. The opposition films Venezuelan security forces threatening their political opponents. That opposition has faced a crackdown, unprecedented mass arrests, and been on the run ever since Nicolas Maduro and his government claimed victory in a July election that the opposition calls stolen. Last week, the U.S. recognized opposition candidate Edmundo Gonzalez as president-elect, as he helps lead the opposition from exile in Spain after Maduro issued a warrant for his arrest. His political matron, Maria Corina Machado, was banned by Maduro's regime from contesting the election. And yet she rallied across the country, mobilizing an opposition and providing proof that Gonzalez won twice as many votes as Maduro. Over 11 years, Maduro's authoritarian rule has led to economic collapse, diplomatic isolation, and the exodus of nearly 8 million Venezuelans. The U.S. continues to call for dialogue between Maduro and the opposition and a transition to democracy.
We come here united in the commitment to defend the human rights of the Venezuelan people and committed to bring about an inclusive Venezuelan-led effort to restore the nation's democratic future.
Maria Corina Machado remains in hiding and joins us now from an undisclosed location in Venezuela. Maria Corina Machado, thanks very much. Welcome to the NewsHour. We've seen an unprecedented crackdown on the opposition, on anyone in Venezuela who opposes the government. Can the opposition survive if the crackdown continues?
Not only the country and the democratic forces will survive, but the regime will have to accept that their time is over. It's important to understand that the more violent they get, it's because they are weaker, they are more desperate. Maduro is totally isolated, not only in Venezuela, but also internationally. And the cracks and fracture among the different groups that comprehend this criminal regime are growing by the hour.
The Biden administration vows to continue imposing costs on Maduro. Critics of the administration, as you know, have called on the administration to impose more sanctions and also revoke the licenses that allow oil companies to work in Venezuela. Do you want to see the Biden administration take those steps now?
We certainly believe all the international community should let know Maduro that all those criminals that are violating human rights, that have committed crimes against humanity, will be held accountable. At the same time, you know that Maduro supports himself on criminal activities from, drug trafficking, gold smuggling, money laundering, and all these resources that they receive, they use them to persecute and repress our population. So it is a moment where the international community should act.
Up until now, the Biden administration has been concerned that more sanctions would imperil the regional coalition it's tried to build, especially Brazil, Colombia, and Mexico's support for what the U.S. is doing. But the critics of the administration want the U.S. to go further regardless of what regional players want. What do you think is more important, increased U.S. pressure or regional unity?
I do not think one thing is against the other. On the contrary, I think that never before Latin American countries and even European are aligned around a democratic transition. Let's remember, we won an election by a landslide. And Maduro since then has unleashed the worst repression campaign he has gotten. So it's a moment that we have to put, a stop to this and make Maduro understand that the cost of staying in power is going to be higher and higher every day that goes by. We cannot wait until January when the president-elect Edmundo Gonzalez, and he was recognized by the United States administration, the government, should be sworn into the presidency.
You say you can't wait until January. January 10th is when the Venezuelan inauguration is scheduled for. January 20th, of course, is when the U.S. inauguration is scheduled for. Have you been speaking to the incoming members of the Trump administration? And do you want to take some of the same steps that he did in the first Trump administration, including sanctions and oil licenses that they took back then?
I have contact with the current administration. I have contact with the next administration, and I hope that this strategy putting strength and pressure on Maduro will work this time, because it's a totally different regime, weaker than ever, and our country is united with a united opposition and legitimate leadership as never before.
You point out that it's a different regime. The Trump administration tried to support Juan Guaido. They called Juan Guaido the president-elect. They tried massive sanctions. It didn't work. Why do you think it didn't work? And why is today different?
Maduro had at that time a lot of support internationally. Not anymore. He's got left Russia, Iran, North Korea, Syria, Belarus, not much more. Maduro at that time had more support from the military that was more united, not anymore. And also he had more resources that he could use to, persecute or to threaten or to even buy allies. Now we have a united opposition, a legitimate leadership, because we went to a primary process and then to an election that we won by a landslide. So this is the time to move forward, for the regime to understand that their time is over, and it is in their best interest to sit down and accept the terms of a negotiated transition. If he doesn't do that before January 10th, then he's going to face Maduro and his cronies a really tough moment, and it's going to be in worse terms than an eventual transition.
Finally, you have supported U.S. legislation to block the U.S. federal government from doing business with anyone who has commercial ties with the Maduro regime. That legislation is sponsored by Representative of Florida Mike Waltz, Senator Marco Rubio, respectively, the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of State under the Trump administration. The Attorney General, in response to your support, says that your statements have, quote, constituted the commission of crimes of treason against the country and conspiracy with foreign countries. Does that increase the threat against you today?
Well, I'm accused every single day of a new crime. I wouldn't have enough lives or years to address all the accusations they have put on me. I don't know what else they think they can do, but they certainly would not stop us from doing what we should. We will never, never surrender.
Maria Corina Machado, thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick.